Hi Renee, thank you. Hi, so I'm Sonia. I'm one of two CEOs of an environmental charity called Global Action Plan, and I'm zooming in currently from Ashdown Forest, which is Sussex, UK, so where Winnie the Pooh was written. We are an environmental charity and we focus on the links between human health and planetary health. So we work on areas like air quality, so it's National Clean Air Day today. We're very excited to be trending on Twitter. That's probably mainly because there's no Love Island this year to compete with. And secondly, we work on an area looking at sort of consumerism and the pressures that drive us to act and be in a different way than we might choose to naturally do so, and the impact that has on the planet, but also our mental health. So two quite diverse areas. We use these materials because we really wanted to explore the role that we could play as a charity and an organisation and collection of individuals in combating racism. So actually we use this perhaps differently than it was originally intended. So as an environmental charity, having a conversation that was really quite out of our comfort zone. And in particular, you know, for me and our management team as particularly, you know, privileged, white, lefty, English people, and not really knowing even how to approach some of the conversations that were brought about by the killing of George Floyd. And so we used the workshop process and the survey tools and the conversation guides that came with it, that Vanessa and Max have just very carefully gone through, to hold an organisation-wide conversation about how we as a charity could combat racism, and those kind of really awkward elephant in the room conversations about how climate change and the solutions being proposed have naturally big implications for social and racial justice. So that's how we use them. From our experience, what it gave us was a really, really rich conversation, because by using the process that Max and Vanessa have talked about, in actually getting people's thoughts on these issues before we actually had the conversation, and actually really using the workshop and the presentation to show people's thoughts as they were currently. Everyone in the room felt like they had already had a say, they'd been listened to, they felt that they were in the same place and they were coming from the same place in the conversation. And so we ended up with a much richer conversation than I would say we would normally have, because people felt empowered to contribute, and that everyone was an expert or not an expert in this case, and that we were able to share the problem that we were talking through, rather than myself or some of the leadership team standing at the front metaphorically and you know, lecturing or just exploring an issue in the way that you might more traditionally do. So I felt that it really got us to a good place as an organisation because of the way that it encouraged everyone to speak. Massive relief really from my side and those involved in normally running these workshops, because it took the pressure off us sort of staging those conversations, having all the answers, and put the emphasis on everyone sharing the experience and coming at it from different directions. So that was absolutely fantastic. And I suppose from our side, what we really learned through going through the process were the huge benefits in really putting in the preparation to how you were going to have the conversation, getting thoughts on all of the topics you were going to discuss before you discussed them, so that everyone came to the table having had some time to personally reflect and think about the issues before we talked about them more broadly. And really that the sort of power of unleashing the power, really, it was making a very level sort of, I suppose, conversation where everyone had a valid idea, opinion, action that we could take forward. In terms of what it helped us to do, is it helped us to develop a sort of collective action plan. And I know that the workshop is meant primarily to help individuals to create their own individual action plans. But what it allowed us to do was come together as a collective of individuals and work out what do we want to do and create an action plan for that, which then a number of different people within the organisation are now leading on. So it was incredibly constructive, and has led to a programme of action off the back of it, which is what's intended from an individual point of view.
Thank you so much, Sonia. It's amazing to hear how exactly to the point of that this can be adapted and modified for basically charged, complicated issues that that requires safe space to process. There's just a question come in. I just want to ask if you can share what were some of the initial reflection questions or prompts that you used focused on the racism theme in your group.
Well, within the survey, we used a lot of the structures suggested for the anti-flying original project, but
Right.
we sort of adapted them. So they started from very, very broad questions around how do you see institutional racism like occurring? Where do you see it occurring, and how do you think it relates to us? Through to where do you think the major areas for the environmental movement are? That will interface with social and racial inequality. So we sort of asked some really, really broad questions. And then when we got into the actual workshop, we then got into much to smaller groups and started looking at people's thoughts and responses to those very broad questions to take it down to more specific conversations around finer points.
Right. And I also just wanted to mention you shared that it led to collection action that as an organization you went into that. And I also want to clarify that this work is very much about that as well, that it's not only about the individual lifestyle change focus, although that's what this was generated for initially, but ideally this can be applied in any number of the ideal is that it can be adapted to organizational strategy work too. So this work could be taken into your, board meeting retreats. It could be taken into organizational strategy sessions when, that create a context for people to actually wrestle with some of these complicated themes. So thanks for sharing that. And it's incredibly exciting and inspiring to hear from you. And we've really appreciated and enjoyed working with you and getting to know you over these past couple of years.